And if you shut up, you just might learn something. Welcome back to Elevate and Illuminate the Empowerment Podcast, where we are launching season 4. Ain't that it? Seemed like just yesterday we was just getting this thing started, and here we are in season 4 already. So this season, we're stepping into a conversation that is both urgent and necessary. We're talking about reentry, not as a buzzword, not as a program, but as a movement. Every year, thousands of men and women return home from incarceration. The question is not whether they're coming home. The question is, what are they coming home to?
Mm.
Are they returning to opportunity or obstacles, support or silence? This season, we're examining the full ecosystem of reentry across our state, from policy to practice, from healthcare to housing, from workforce development to peer mentorship. Because sustainable second chances require coordinated systems and courageous leadership. And to open this season, I couldn't think of a more fitting guest. Tonight, we're joined by someone who started their own movement and stands in the gap for individuals navigating one of the most vulnerable seasons of their lives, the transition from incarceration back into community. His work isn't just about services, it's about structure, it's about accountability, it's about transformation. He understands that reentry is not just release dates. It's about rebuilding identity, restoring dignity, and creating real pathways forward. Tonight's conversation is going to challenge assumptions. It's going to highlight what's working, and it's going to force us to ask a bigger question. If we truly believe in redemption, are we building systems that support it?
Mm.
Season 4 starts now. Let's elevate, let's illuminate, and let's talk about what it really takes to come home and stay home.
Mm.
Again, welcome everybody. I am excited to get this season underway. Where we are going to highlight reentry services and all things included. So we'll be all over the gamut. Some we'll be talking about policy, we'll be talking about structure, we'll be talking about leadership, we'll be talking about peer-led services. Um, we're gonna touch on all of it because it's a much needed topic and to inform individuals of the resources that are available to them upon coming home. Um, with that, I'd like to give the floor to you, allow you to take a minute to introduce yourself to the audience.
Hey, peace and blessings. My name is Lester Young. I'm the executive director of Path to Redemption Training Consultant. With the mission is to empower those who are currently and formerly incarcerated, helping them find inspiration and transformation after a minor setback like incarceration. I'm also a five-time author, national speaker, workshop facilitator, husband, father, a servant who want to continue to use his platform, his experience to empower others in their journey of transformation and finding their individual or their own path to redemption. So, pleasure to meet you all, and I look forward to diving into this. My brother, I thank you for the invite. And I'm looking forward, man, to touching the ground in Indiana, man. And let's see what it do, man.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm sure you've heard this before. There's more than corn in Indiana.
Oh, I got you. I got you. I got.
So for those who this may be your first time tapping in to Elevate and Illuminate, the chat room is always open. So if you have something you want to add to the conversation, a question that you want to ask, um, feel free to put it in the chat. It's a whole community of individuals in there. So get in there, introduce yourself, say hello to everybody, um, and let's get it going.
I can't sit down for this one, bro. I feel like this is gonna be a good conversation, and this is gonna require me to stand. So I'm standing on this conversation, brother. So just bear with me. I'm just raising my desk. I'd rather stand on this right here to respect the conversation right now. You feel me?
Absolutely, absolutely. So with that, since you standing and ready to go, blood pumping, let's go on and dive straight on in, man. And we'll get a chat time to warm up everybody to get in. Um, so take us to the beginning.
Take us
What
to the beginning.
inspired you to found Path to Redemption, and what personal or professional experiences shaped this mission?
Great question. Great question. And I share this. If you think about the word path to redemption, it's someone searching for a path of redemption, looking for hope, forgiveness, restoration, and guidance. That's what path the redemption means. I was sentenced to life in prison for murder at 19 years old. And I remember my first 3 years in prison. You know, you go to prison, you want to hang out, you just acclimating to prison, and you in this full blown denial about the reality of your crime. But as the years continue to tick down, for me, I started realizing the gravity and the severity of the crime. Like I literally, unfortunately, took another person's life in less than 15 to 20 seconds over something very simple that did not deserve to lose his life for.
Right.
In sitting in prison, I say that prison, they never gave me a guidebook to how to deal with grief, guilt, remorse. I was given the rules and regulation, policy, procedures of what is the prison requiring of me, but not to
Yep.
deal with the gravity of guilt when it washes over you and you don't know what to do with it, right? So I remember it was one Friday night. I was sitting in my cell, man, and I was going through this process. I was in this phase of trying to remove the heaviness of what I did. Like, it was nothing in prison that could remove it from me. And I sat in my prison cell one Friday and I was watching this show called Dateline. And I heard this mother like had this deep agony crying because she lost her son to a very similar crime, right? That like mine, drug related crime. And I remember that Friday night, I tried to go to sleep, brother, and I couldn't go to sleep. And something just told me to get up and pray. And I got up and I started praying. And like we go through that phase of, oh God, forgive me, God, this, that bargaining phase of bargaining with God, like, God, I promise I will do this if you take this heaviness off of me. And in that, I felt like I was told by God, like, I have forgiven you. But he said that you have to seek forgiveness of the person you have harmed, the person you have caused death to.
Wow.
So in that stage there, I remember it was late at night. I would say around about 1 o'clock that night. I'm on this cold concrete prison floor. Everybody's sleeping. You might hear the toilet flushing here or there, but I'm on this cold floor with my roommate at the bottom bunk. I'm on the floor, and I'm on this concrete floor, and I'm in a fetus position, crying. And I remember my roommate rolled over. He's like, "Yo, what's going on with you?" I was like, "Bro, let me process." You know what I'm saying? And I was grateful to have someone to give me this space. But in that, that's when I began to communicate for the first time. After the demise of my victim, I for the first time in about 3 years, I remember uttering his name. And uttering his name, I asked for forgiveness in that cell. I felt that was the only thing that was going to remove the heaviness and the gravity of taking another human being life. And I remember saying that I promise that I will honor your life for the rest of your life, for the rest of my life. And that's where after about an hour or so on that floor crying, I went and laid back down. And when I woke up that morning, I came up with the term path to redemption. And path to
Wow.
redemption was what I started teaching inside of prison. And I would say it was like, this is like, I got sentenced in 1992. So I would say like 96, 97. That's when that journey begun for me. I had that awakening, and God said the only way I'm going to be able to remove this heaviness from your spirit is that you have to not seek atonement with the name of the victim of the person that you unalive.
Wow. Yeah, that's what you call fuel for a mission. Um,
Yeah.
wow. Okay. So the name itself is powerful.
hmm
What does redemption truly mean in the context of re-entry and second chances?
redemption, and reentry and second chance. It's about taking ownership, taking complete ownership for the actions in which you have caused harm to others. Like, it's not about you putting a band-aid on yourself and say, hey, I'm ready to walk out of prison, I'm fine. Like, some individuals walk out and reentry and they never made any attempt to atone and restore the harm that they caused, right? And I believe that it has to be some reckoning for that. So when you think of when the word redemption as it relates to that, it's about restorative justice. It's about restoring the harm that you have caused and holding yourself accountable for the crime that you committed. Not blaming the system. We all can agree on this chat, in this call, that the system is broken. We all can agree with that. We can understand the economics of the community is broken and what leads. We know all of the driving factors that can lead to incarceration. But at the end of the day, at the very end of the day, you and I still have an individual choice to make. So I pulled the trigger. A person may have sold drugs, may have robbed somebody. You still have to take ownership. So when you say redemption and second chance, redemption and second chance is saying take ownership for the decision which you have made and begin this restorative peace of trying to give peace and closure to those you have harmed, whether it's your family, whether it's your victim, whether it's your community, and even allow yourself to be able to go through this process of restoring by forgiving yourself.
Absolutely. And being, justice involved myself, I can mirror those sentiments because everyone is going to come to a point
Hmm.
during that journey where they're going to have to face themselves.
Absolutely, bro.
Like you have to, you're going to either literally or figuratively be looking at the man in the mirror, and
Mm.
you have to like face some things about yourself. And I know when I had my moment, I, it's like I realized for the first time some things in myself that I absolutely did not like.
Mm.
And
Okay.
like I knew I was gonna have to dig deep and change that, um, in order to move forward.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I was gonna remain stagnant and I was gonna keep getting the same results that I've been getting because my track record had already shown that. You
Hmm.
know, I I had my moment in segregation.
Yeah.
To find yourself one in prison at 18, but then to turn around and find yourself in a prison inside the prison for the same activity that led you to prison.
That's the thing, bro. That
That's a
that's the thing.
that's a
And
serious problem.
yeah, I think about, like, Michael Jackson made that song that I remember used to ring in my ear during this transformational phase. Look at the man in the mirror. Change cannot happen unless you look at the man in the mirror, right? And going back again is every individual comes to that realization that they have to look that man in the mirror. And I remember vividly the time I was brushing my teeth, and if you know those prison mirrors in South Carolina, I don't know what it is like where y'all were, but our mirrors in prison was the most it was the worst kind of mirrors because you could very barely see yourself in these mirrors. But I remember
Yeah,
one day, man, one morning actually, I was just at that metal toilet, the little scratched up mirror that you barely can see yourself in. And I remember I was sitting there brushing my teeth this morning, and I remember something just told me to look at this mirror. And for the first time in a real long time that I saw my reflection, and I sat and I remained quiet in that and allowed that reflection I saw in that mirror to speak to me. Right. So, and when it spoke to me, it again reminded me that this journey is going to be a hard journey for redemption. It's going to be a
right.
hard journey, meaning that because I made this atonement to God and seek the forgiveness of my victim, doesn't mean that it's going to be an immediate release. And like I said, this happened in 1996 when I first went through this process. I didn't walk out of prison until 2014, right? And in that, so I always tell people that redemption is not a quick fix. And most men and women incarcerated or experiencing something, they want a quick fix. When we're talking about what redemption looks like in reentry, redemption looks like a reentry, as I said, restoration, not of the rights. We know that we need all of our rights reinstated when we get out of prison. But but I'm talking about the restoration of the individual, the broken man or the broken woman who walked into prison, and the walls of incarceration continue to chip at those areas of brokenness that it leads to so many other behaviors, right? So when we talk about restore, brushing that teeth in that mirror, man, I was like, bro, I'm broken. I saw a 16-year-old Lester who at this time I was like 24 years old. I saw a 16-year-old Lester who was broken, who was still, I call it, I was sitting in a corner crying at 16. I'm looking at myself when I was looking in this mirror. I saw the 16-year-old broken Lester who was struggling with the grief of losing his mother at 16 years old and never fully processed that grief of his mother, going to school, waking up one morning and walking out of the house and coming back the same day within 3 to 4 hours, and your mother's passed away. She has transitioned on at 16 years old. And in
Mm.
this conversation, in this situation, the night before her transition, me and her got into a disagreement. We got into a disagreement about me, simple as not wanting to wash the dishes at the time she wanted me to wash the dishes. So I went to bed that night, upset with my mother, woke up that next morning. My father said, "Hey, I need you to stay home with your mother. She's not feeling well." I was like, "Dad, I got to go to school." I did not have to go to school. But because I was like low key still upset with my mother, I did not even walk in the room that night, that morning, and tell my mother goodbye that I was going to school. Normally, that's what me and my three other sisters would do, which they did. I didn't. I played like I was so busy, so I ran out of the house. But when I ran back into the house, my mother's spirit had already transitioned on. So when I said I looked at that young kid in the mirror, I was 16, but I never healed. He never healed. The 16-year-old Lester never healed from grief, never healed from the loss of his mother, never really communicated or even had the words to articulate the pain that I felt. So as I'm brushing my teeth in prison, I looked at myself, and that's who I saw. I saw that version. And I realized immediately then that in order for me to be the man in my own redemption, I needed to be the man, that I needed to heal Lester, the 16-year-old Lester, and then the 16-year-old Lester will give me the strength. Follow me. The 16-year-old Lester, once I heal with that, will give me the strength to muster through my many years of incarceration. Because now I've made peace with my mother. I processed that grief. I made process the grief of the harm that I caused my victim, and was going through this process of restoring and putting the pieces back that was broken. That's where it is. You know what I'm saying? So I feel you with that, brother.
Yeah. Um, and that speaks to the part of the journey that isn't quote unquote televised, that
Mm-hmm.
people see, the unresolved trauma that individuals carry. We're
Mm-hmm.
more and we're more we tend to ask what happened versus why it happened.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
And that's because we've already as a society adopted this. You commit a crime, you do the time, you go to prison, and we understand prisons were designed for a reason. But
Mm-hmm.
when your model is punishment first
Mm-hmm.
versus the rehabilitation versus the diversion, the correcting part, the actual true act of rehabilitation, then you can have an individual that can sit there for 30 years and not deal with none of this stuff and come home a grown child still suffering from
Yeah.
some childhood trauma.
Yeah. That's
so
real.
so incarceration did nothing but basically warehouse them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So going back again too, like this is why I believe when you had opened up about peers and credible messengers, people with lived experience. This is why I truly believe, like we see over the last 10 years that I've been in this work around reentry, advocacy, and organizing and policy, I'm really seeing a real movement shift where people like us are now being at the tables. People like us are now creating the tables, right? We are, but we're still dealing with a lot of the systematic stigma and biases and prejudice as it relates to us. You know what I mean? And what I mean by that is that Like for instance, the DOC, the Department of Correction, nationwide, they know they have a human problem. They know they have a real problem in the system, right? And you cannot continue to incarcerate you out of the problem. More incarceration, more stiffer policies, more restrictions in prison don't change behavior. What changes behavior is those real moments that we just spoke about, the man in the mirror, that period of brokenness. But in this now, I think the power we have is we have enough of us now to go back into the system and redesign the system. Because what we have done, we have successfully navigated the system, right? I'm gonna share this example with you, right? There's a great book to read. It's called The Influencer, a great book. And The Influencer is a book that is focusing on how to change behavior. It's about leaders understanding how to correct behavior, and they have over like 10 examples of this. But one example of this, I'm going to try to be brief with this, is that Jimmy Carter, he has an organization that their goal was to exterminate what is called guinea worms. Guinea worms was a parasite that on the Sahara part of Africa, people were dying. Dozens and dozens of people were dying weekly, monthly, because of this thing called a parasite called the guinea worm. And what they came to discover is that people were dying. There was two villages that were right beside one another, what they call positive, negative, deviant behavior. But two of these people, they found the source of the problem is that all of them were drinking from one pond of water. Every day, the women will go collect the water. So they realized that the parasite was getting into the bodies of the villagers because of the water. So they had to study the behavior of the people. So what they studied quickly, they studied that the women in village A was using their dress as a filter, a natural filter. Village B, the women were just getting the water and putting it in their thing and put it on their head and walk, and then the people from the village sip it, right? So they immediately saw that people were dying because of the village A. People weren't dying because they were naturally filtering out the parasite. The parasite was staying in the women's dresses. That was a filter that it didn't contaminate the water. So in short, what happens is they call positive, negative, deviant behavior, meaning they studied a group of people who came from the same environment. One was successful, one wasn't successful. So what you start doing, you start studying the groups of people who have been successful, and that's how you create your programs. It's called reverse engineering. So when I say the Department of Corrections, when we talking about how do we reinvent or reimagine corrections, corrections have to look at you who did almost 27 years. You said something 27 years. Why there's no way in the world why you're not on the board of consultants for the Department of Correction. There's no reason why
Absolutely.
you and others are not at the table, or myself is not at the table as a consultant for any program that they're creating. Why? Because you lived in an environment for 27 years. You successfully navigated these environments. You did not. You came out of prison and you built a movement that is worthy to be studied. That's worthy to be studied. But what the Department of Correction would do is that they would give you a token of acknowledgement, but they would never say, hey, Marcus, I need you to come to this table. We want to change the behavior of the people. We're not going to give you crumbs. We want to put you at the center of the table or at the head of the table to change. That's what I believe transformation is about. But what they'll do, they'll give us a few little tokens here or there. But you and me are examples of positive deviant behavior. We came from the DOC. Got me. We came from the DOC. Brother, we made it. People died in prison at our age. We went to prison
Yeah.
young. To come home, you got a wife. I have a wife. You got kids. You got men who now iron sharpen iron. And you mean to tell me that we talking about what are we talking about? If we talking about reentry, and you're not coming to the experts to get the information and say, how did you navigate this space?
Yeah.
You are still doing a disservice to the movement. That's how I feel.
Absolutely. I concur.
You're doing a disservice to the
um,
movement, bro.
yeah, that's real. In any field, you know, we're talking about reentry, but that's in any field. I often, because we work with juveniles as well, on the preventative measure, like what kind of conversation are we having if The youth aren't at the table.
Exactly. You got to center their voices, but it's a fear. That's why I said systematic
Yeah.
fear and bias is that they say that they understand us, but then some are afraid of their jobs being in jeopardy. They feel like, oh, I done went to college and got these degrees. That's fine. We're not saying that you're not invited to the table. What we're saying is that you gotta center the voices of those who have experienced the problem that you're trying to solve. And if they have navigated successfully, we need to ask those who have the problem, have successfully navigated, what made you successful? And let's create the programs. Everything we build is built from out, from the information you all share, whether it's in the juvenile or adult prison. We built reentry programs. The question is, what has made me successful in reentry? Man, I can tell you 1,000 things that have made me successful in reentry. Are you willing to go and put it into your program today? Are you willing to go change your policy and procedure as it relates to consulting work, training work, or even changing your entire program and create a program that is not something that you put in place for the last 10 years and you're trying to hold on to it because you don't want to respect the expertise of those who've been impacted. So I had to
Uh,
stand, but I told you I was going to stand now. I don't, you
uh,
know what I'm saying? Let me know you
yeah,
can't move now.
yeah, that's what we want. um, so in the chat we have a question. I think I know the answer to this, but I want to give you the opportunity to express. Since they won't invite you great men to the table, how do you create a new table and invite our people to the table?
That's what we're doing right now, bro. You iron sharpen iron. You creating your own. You creating a nation of men that is now saying that we survived the system, and we creating our own programs, and we're going to create that iron sharpen iron path of redemption. We're not. I'm not asking to be at the table. No, I'm creating my own platform. And you want me to come? This is who I am, right? But we have to build that, and that's the beauty of again to show you what you and I have been like me and the men that you work with and those that I know. It showed that we did something in prison that the Department of Correction didn't give us. They gave us time to think. But it's by the grace of God, we got what we changed. Once we had changed this, like you said, when you was on solitary confinement, once you shifted this,
Yeah.
you opened up a window that was closed for years. And that was me. When I started reading books and when I started changing the way I think, brother, my mind, I was like, oh my God, like I had to commit a crime on the front. Like, oh, I'm never going back to that old me because God has opened up a window in my mind that has shown me what my gifts are, my potential are. Man, it's we create our own tables now. We create our own organizations, our own LLCs, our own nonprofits, our own movements. And we telling you this is who we are and this is what we bring to the table. We're not asking to sit at the table for a coffee cup. We don't want a coffee cup. We don't want a t-shirt. We want monetary means to continue to move our movement. If not, we got to continue to build the movement by creating our own businesses to fuel our vision instead of asking everybody else to fuel our
Mm, talk that talk. Um, so what specific barriers? We got a lot of obstacles and different things that that of course we have to deal with in this whole process of trying to reassimilate back into society. But what would you say are the specific barriers that you are most passionate about dismantling for justice involved individuals?
We had that talk. Like I said, of course, most people will say, I know that one of the biggest challenges that we all face is employment and housing, right? And all of those things. Well, we know each state has their own collateral consequences. Nationally, there's over 48,000 collateral consequences that prevent individuals from moving forward after incarceration. Some states are better, some states are worse, right? So, but when we're thinking about that, of course, I want to be able to remove these barriers when it comes down to employment opportunities. I want to remove the barriers when it comes down to individuals' rights being reinstated after their incarceration. After a certain amount of time, they shouldn't be a brother. I know a couple of my brothers, they have been home for the last 20 years and they're still on parole. Why should that man still be on parole? After he done 27 years, he's still on parole. He has to ask for permission to go from North Carolina to South Carolina, which is only an hour before you cross the different lines. That's the type of stuff that I'm talking about, right? Individuals who are getting their rights reinstated because most states are denying people that opportunity to get off of probation and parole, the right to vote, the right to be able to bear arms, the right to be able to purchase to be able to rent property, the rights to be able to get life insurance. If you have a felony conviction in some states, you can't even get life insurance. They consider you high risk, right? So those are the barriers that I'm talking about that we need to move externally from the system. But now my most important barrier I believe that every man and woman has to address is that internal barrier, brother. Like we can do all of the other stuff that I'm just talking about, but I still believe that we as individuals have to be inside of these cages of incarceration, helping brothers change these brothers remove these internal barriers that led to their incarceration, that internal barrier of the mind. If we can go and continue to help brothers educate their minds and change their spirit and their heart, man, there's going to be a group of brothers that's going to walk out of prison, man, that is going to change the world. But we got to like get into this first, right? Because some brothers are walking out and they're getting the job, but their minds have not shifted yet. The brothers are getting in relationships, they're getting opportunities, but their mind and their heart and their soul is not right because they're still in trauma mode. And what I mean by trauma mode, when you have experienced some form of trauma, you're in survival mode. You don't have a chance to heal. So you just bleeding on everybody. You leaving trails of harm everywhere, and you're not even aware of it. You're in denial about it. So that's what I believe the internal barrier that is one of the biggest barriers that we have to start addressing with those who are inside of the correctional environment.
Yes, sir. Um, we got a couple things in the chat. So Angie said, as someone who worked for the Department of Corrections for 10 plus years,
Mm,
I cannot commend you both enough. Those with lived experience is vital to this work. Absolutely. And then Stephanie asked, what do you need from your people, your community to help you further the mission?
mm,
What do you need? What do you need them to know? What do
mm,
you need them to do? And
mm,
how can they support in the in an effective manner?
mm. That's a really good question,
That's
brother.
that's a loaded question.
Yeah, it's a whole lot. I don't think we got all day for that one. We might need to do this an offline conversation. But I would say, like, when we talking about our people, the people, when you say our people, the communities that we're returning back to, they're still in trauma. They're still in survival mode. So a lot of our people can't really support us. Like they can give us support as far as like some words of encouragement, but a lot of our community, even though they've never been to prison, they're still dealing with their own personal traumas, and they're still in survival mode. When we're talking about building an organization, and if you, especially for nonprofit, we'll love your donations because the nonprofit space right now is almost a dog eat dog type environment because everyone's competing for grants and the money that they're giving you. So most organizations that are doing great work is not even being seen by a nonprofit because they don't have the name recognition. The gatekeepers don't want to let you in the door. They want to hold on to their power and their prestige and all of these different things. So when it comes down to our community, I believe our community need to start investing in these grassroots organizations, whether that's giving your time, your expertise. Like you have a lot of our people in our community that went to college and they have all of these skills and they see a nonprofit struggling. Like go to that nonprofit and offer a couple hours out of the week just to help them get their books right. Do something to help the nonprofit, especially when you're talking about these, like for instance, your organization, Iron Sharpen Iron. If you're talking about you got over 30 men in your organization, these are 30 men that represent families, 30 individuals that represent wives, children, grandmothers, aunties, and everybody else. So we got to do what we can to invest in them because when we invest in the men in your organization, guess what? We change generations. So even if like how we go to church and we give tithes and all, start doing this to nonprofits. Start donating money and time to these nonprofits that are grassroots, that are breaking generational curse, but sometimes it's led by formerly incarcerated people. The system has still fully not accepted these nonprofit leaders, so they're not going to give you all of the money that they're going to give a big name organization that has been here for 20 years. They're getting millions and millions of dollars, but they ain't doing the work as an Iron Sharpen Iron or Path to Redemption is doing. So we need more of our community to start making sacrifice to give us, monthly dues, help us with monthly dues. Find a way if you got a skill that you can help sharpen and strengthen the community, the nonprofit. Come give some of your time. Help if you're in counseling, social work. Come in and start doing free counseling, free pro bono to the community of men and women who are coming home. If you're an attorney, you from the community, do some pro bono, come and do some expungement, pardon stuff, do some legal counseling. We need to come together collective as a community and share the resources because scarcity mindset is harming us as a community right now, especially nonprofits that are being led by black and brown people, people who are from the community that are formerly incarcerated. Brother, you know the dance that they want you to do just to get a check.
Yeah.
Why do we need to keep dancing? They judge you on your past. They speak behind your back. They don't support you. They say they support you publicly. I mean, private. I mean, when they publicly, but privately, they say, "Well, I don't know. Lester been in prison for 22 years. I think he still may." You know, it's those whispers that prevents the funding to come and the stronger support to come to the to organizations that's doing some real work, man. So we gotta like bro, we gotta work out here. We working harder than anybody else, but we doing it.
Yeah.
But you know the dance they want you to do, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, and it's almost it's it's crazy to to be as passionate as we are um about this work and then to try to move in that space. Because I know like early on for me, um, I came in high hopes, um, and I took off running.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I started running into all these barriers, obstacles, mountains that you had to climb just to just to get motion
Mm-hmm.
on this thing, like it was discouraging.
Yeah.
It was discouraging. Like I had to dig deep into that passion that was fueling me to like really stay the course. So yeah, I get exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah, and then it's like you're not judged the same. Being that we're led,
Yeah.
it's actually a perfect example of something, right? Like I was my organization. I had hired over about 20 formerly incarcerated men. We working in a different space. I'm not going to get into the details of the organization. But we're doing some work. We're contracted to do this great work. Everybody, oh, y'all doing great work. But there was one incident that happened with one of our team members that had a disagreement with someone. It didn't turn to be a violent situation. It didn't turn to be really nothing, right? But is the level in which they magnified that one small disagreement, they magnified it to from here to be this large, right? It became this huge issue. At the end of the day, it was nothing because if it was anyone else outside of people who've been in prison doing this work, it wouldn't even been a conversation, right? So
Right.
what I'm saying with you is that as formerly incarcerated executive directors of organizations, we have to make sure that we are following the letter to the letter our organization, meaning we got to do what's right. And the men and the women who are part of it, connected to it, is that they got to understand that you are carrying not only you as the executive, but every person that is tied to your organization that is led by someone formerly incarcerated. You are carrying the responsibility of every man and woman and their families and their community when you're a part of an organization, especially now if you're contracted and you're receiving funds. One mistake can jeopardize an entire organization because you're formerly incarcerated.
Right.
That's not a fair standard. They give other organizations grace, but they won't give you grace if someone from your organization does something that they looking to justify removing you out of this situation. So I tell the men now and women in my organization, this is why I do a lot of training around personal development, leadership, et cetera, because organizations like us, we need to understand like that man beside you, that man got a wife, that man got a car note, he got a mortgage, he got children, he got all this. The man who's beside him, he got the same thing. So if you see him, you need to check him before he destroys everything and now puts that family in a deficit because our situation is completely different. They would remove us immediately and now
Yeah.
that whole like 20 people could lose their income because of one mistake that they magnified because you're a formerly incarcerated leader. So this is why leadership, education, and training is so imperative. And men and women who are doing this work in organizations, this is why I say the mental barrier has to be removed. the man has to check it. The man, that individual got to check their heart every day in this work, because this work requires extra. This work requires you to run a marathon every day, and you can. And there's so many people depending on you, not just their families, but there are men and women who are coming out of prison depending on iron sharpened iron, path to redemption. There are men and women in prison getting inspiration when they're thinking about harming themselves. They thinking about iron sharpened iron or Lester or what they thinking like, man, they did it. Man, I can do 27. I got it. I'm coming. I'm tired, but I'm gonna do it. So everybody, not saying we perfect, but you gotta make sure that your moral compass is in that North Star locked in on this purpose. That, bro, you don't get no room for no harm, bro, because you harm everybody. You get fired or you get in trouble. It's not just you, bro. 20 people, 30 people have been experienced the harm now. You know.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's a very good point. Um, so throughout the conversation thus far, we mentioned it in the introduction, and you've also made mention of the path to redemption on multiple occasions. Can you take a moment and just kind of share with everybody like exactly what the organization is, what it does, what you offer, and what services are available through your organization?
Yeah, great. Like I said, I don't. I've learned when I got out of prison that as I started my nonprofit in 2014. Came home, struggled with funding, et cetera, et cetera. So I started an LLC. My nonprofit focused on aftercare for those who are transitioning out of incarceration, youth aftercare, adult aftercare. We focus on that reentry piece in nonprofit. But then I immediately realized that in order for me to really move this needle further in my organization, I need to have money coming in. And as a new organization in South Carolina, funding is very difficult in South Carolina. Like a lot, like some of the stuff that you all are doing, y'all are way more ahead of us in some areas. So I decided, as study business all my life. During incarceration, came home and studied business. And one of my mentors told me, said, "Hey man, why are you waiting for someone to fund your vision when God has given you the gift to create the provisions to pay and invest in your own vision, which is my nonprofit?" So I started the LLC. So Path of Redemption is not only a nonprofit, it's an LLC. The LLC is training and consulting. This is where I do all my keynote speaking, my training on leadership, personal development, emotional intelligence, critical conversation, and then I do consulting work for organizations that are running nonprofits, and they say, "Hey, we got this reentry program and we need some extra eyes to it." I help organizations identify what their blind spots are in their organization as it relates to peer-to-peer support specialists, reentry services or navigation. I focus on that, but then I also come in under my full profit to do a deep dive training for those who are certified peer support specialists, credible messengers, formerly incarcerated men who are now required to take this mantle on and transform the community, but no one really focused on their personal development side. So I come into organizations and help individuals set that personal development trajectory or a personal plan for their staff so that now you got a plan in place around personal development. Because I worked for an organization once before, right? And it was crazy to see that this organization was getting millions of dollars, but they had no money invested in personal development for their staff, which is all formerly incarcerated people.
Right.
Like none. Like they wanted you to go do all of this great work, but they did not even think for a minute that you needed personal development. If you go to any other organizations, businesses, they have a personal development fund where individuals have a yearly personal development fund to focus on growing and developing. So you think about a formerly incarcerated organization that doesn't have it, don't have personal development. They just have enough money to pay stipends, carry on the mission, but no one teaching brothers about personal professional boundaries after incarceration. They're not teaching you self-regulation. They're not teaching you how to process trauma after you had encountered trauma working with those who are coming out of incarceration. They don't tell you how to regulate when you struggle. They don't teach that stuff. They just assume that you should know this. And this is again, I think that a lot of nonprofits missing is that piece. So that's really what I do, man. I come in and help that part of the organization move along in that personal development and understanding what leadership is. For me, I had to go through various programs of leadership, and I realized quickly that a lot of organizations don't formerly incarcerated organizations or that are hiring people with felony convictions, they don't have no knowledge of what leadership looks like. Most of us who are in these organizations, we're self-taught. We read books in prison, we talked about it, we got out of prison, and now we're in these organizations, but we still lack so much. So that's what my LLC focuses on. So money that I make, I put a certain percentage of that money into my nonprofit, and then I do what I want to do with that. Meaning, I donate books to the prison. When I fly to different states, if you can't fly me to go into a prison, I do all pro bono work going into a prison. If you pay me, that's cool, but I made some money I can put aside that I can go and make impact inside of the prison. Because prisons don't want to pay you to come in; they want you to come and speak, which is cool. So why do I wait? That's how I set it up, brother, and that's how I said it.
Okay, good stuff. Much needed service. So definitely can respect and appreciate the vision in what you do. Ever since I've met you, the path that you've illuminated is one that I love and I enjoy. I follow you when you talk, I listen. Um, so appreciate you for the service that you do provide. Very much needed. So considering, both of us got incarcerated at such young ages.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we hadn't even fully matured or finished developing yet. So because of that, it has awakened something in me that has made me put focus on the preventative
Mm-hmm.
measures to this whole journey. What are your
Mm-hmm.
thoughts on the preventative?
It's key, man. It's key. It's key, brother. Like going back again into going to the juvenile facilities, and it's heartbreaking to see young teenage boys and girls, 13, 14 years old, now going to be spending 30 years in prison.
Yeah.
Like that's heavy, bro. Like 14 years old, you just jumped off the porch, as they say, you going to prison. But it was this young man I remember working with. He had 30 years, and I was working with him on emotional intelligence, right? And this young man told me, he said, man, he was like, he called me Unc. He's like, Unc, why did I have to come to prison to learn this? Why couldn't I learn this in school? Why couldn't my parents teach this? And a light bulb came on in my head. I said, man, we preventive, not necessarily being in the juvenile facility. We got to go in these schools. We got to go in schools and communities and set programs up in there to help our young people navigate the complexities of what they're dealing with. Because a person going in there 30 years, man, they're in survival mode. They're in trauma all day long. They're not even trying to really grasp it with the information you shared, even though it's good information. They're thinking about how I'm going to do 30 years of my life in prison. So when we talk about preventive measure, man, I think that we got to go into these schools, man. Schools are a safe space. And we got to go into these schools, we got to go into these communities and start working with our young people around social emotional learning. One of the most powerful books I've read many books, but one of them was a book called Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. Daniel Goleman wrote the book, and he was the first one that really highlighted emotional intelligence. And I remember one of my friends told me to read the book. I was like, man, I ain't reading that book, man. I don't, and I started diving into this book on emotional intelligence in prison. And that's when I realized the power of self regulation, self awareness, right? Self govern, instant gratification, how to delay instant gratification, which is one of the main things that lead to criminal behavior for our young people as well as our adults. But it's really about how do you teach them to create what I call the trigger, the response. That's what most of our young people deal with. They get triggered from something that harmed them, that threatens them. They respond, and most of the responses, just like most of them, I ask all of them. I said, "What did your mama tell you, or your parents told you when somebody hit you? What did they say?" They said, "Well, my mama said when somebody hit me, what did you tell them to do? Hit them back."
Hit them back.
Right? So you think about that's a social learning that was from that environment. It was taught from somebody that they trusted, which is their parents. Their parents never shared with them that if someone hit you, they triggered you, they made you upset. Before you respond, take some time, that buffer before you respond, because every response is a consequences. See, our family members never told us that. They just said when somebody hits you, you hit them back, and they never told you to evaluate the consequences. So what I'm looking at, what I do in schools right now, I go and I wrote a book called The Power of Choice, Social Emotional Learning book. That I go and I use my life experience from 16 to 19 years old as a preventative measure, saying, look at my life, look at the mistakes I made. But here are 4 things I wish I would have learned: how to delay instant gratification. You hit me, I'm going to hit you back. How do I better address my irrational thinking and impulsive thinking, and how do I apply more critical thinking skills to my decision making? Impulsive thinking, irrational thinking, instant gratification is the 3 leading era of thinking that causes our young people to find themselves performing bad in school, whether they get kicked out of school, they end up going to the Department of Juvenile Justice, they end up engaging in gun violence because, again, you hit me, you triggered me, my response is I'm going to hit you back. No one's teaching our young people in between that space. There are some things that you can do before you have a response. So this is what I believe, that preventive measure, and this is where we come into play, right? As people with lived experience, you know what a 30-second decision costs you. You know what a
Mm-hmm.
30-second decision costs your victim's family and those who are connected to that crime. I know what a 30-second decision costs me, right? So now we can teach our young people critical thinking by using our lived experience to say that because I was impulsive, I was irrational, I was instant seeking instant gratification. This is the cause, this is the harm. Let's apply the critical thinking skills. And this is why I believe that we can start changing the trajectory of our young people entering into these systems that will destroy their lives and continue to perpetuate this generational harm that is happening in our communities.
Mm, absolutely. Um, so what does long-term success look like in your model?
When some of the people that we mentor, they now take the lead and continue to move forward because I'm 53 years old. I'm 53. Majority of my life I've been in prison. I
Yeah.
came home 12. I came home in 2014. I've been doing this work I've been doing the work all my years in prison. I've been working since I've been in prison on this work. It's not like I walked out of prison and started talking this talk. I've been talking this talk when I was inside of prison. When no one saw me, I said my best class has been in prison. My best talk's been in prison. That when the world didn't see me, my brothers saw me. That was the toughest crowd that I needed to win over. I won them over,
Yeah.
and I got their support. You know what it is to lead brothers in prison.
Yeah.
Brothers ain't gonna say you my leader in prison. I ain't talking about no gang culture, but I'm talking about brothers who respected your path to redemption. They said, man, I'm gonna follow this brother. Brother, you good or
Yeah.
bad, I'm gonna rock with you. Bro, that's hard. So I've been doing this work. So my long-term success look like, man, like bro, like having more of us. I want to see us in places that we ain't been. Like I said, schools. When you're talking about a barrier, some schools having policy where they don't want a credible messenger or lived experience to come to the schools and teach classes. That needs to change if we know that that person who may have a felony conviction that committed a crime at 19 years old, that was in the 90s, it's 2026. Change the policy, especially if this person is showing you a track record over the last 5 years or the last 3 years. They have not gotten into anything. They're investing in community. Why not? Because the schools, and I'm emphasizing the schools, because in South Carolina, this is where we see a lot of the conflict spilling off in the community. Is because now you said something in school, you post something about me on social media that you heard in the school. Now we're going to settle it because we live in different parts of the city. But when we come on that bus, all of us going to land right there. Why isn't there a mediation group of men who are formerly incarcerated, lived experience, doing mediation that the school had you on speed dial, bro? School got you on speed dial. Say, hey, Jamarcus, listen, we got a conflict brewing right here. We need the iron shop and iron men to come to the schools and do a mediation. But
Yeah.
the mediation starts by building relationships. Hey, Marcus, could you come and spend lunch with all of the students today? Because mediation is only powerful when there's a relationship. And this is what I said. There can never be correction without relationship. So by inviting you to be a part of the school culture, when there is a problem, they're gonna say, hey man, call Big Unc. Call Iron Shop and Iron Men. Call so and so because I got a better relationship with him. I need to talk to him about what before I go and crash out. I need to talk to him about that regulation stuff. How do I regulate my emotion, huh? But see, teachers don't have that. Teachers are overwhelmed with other things. This is
Right.
where we need the village of men who have experienced it to come into these schools, come into the communities and start doing mediation, restorative justice circles, teaching our young people how to resolve conflict without a gun. They're not learning conflict resolution. Not in school. They're learning math, reading, social studies, science, and a couple other things, but they're not learning social skills that is going to prepare them for the real life situation in their neighborhoods where conflict is going to happen. They're not learning conflict resolution. They're learning what? You hit me, I'm gonna hit you.
Yeah, and it's crazy because when you had first mentioned a question about the preventative and reaching the youth, and you talked
Hmm.
about the schools, like I kind of chuckled inside because I'm like they making us jump do just as much of a dance as the DOC is.
That's what I'm saying. So when you ask about the barrier, the
Like
superintendent.
yeah. So, but you touched on it earlier, by just, doing the work. We talked about building our own tables, you know what I mean? And doing the work regardless. I think that's how we change the narrative. Even if it's a slow pace, that's
Mhm.
how we change the narrative by continuing to do this work, despite all
Yeah,
of the challenges, all the obstacles, all the refusals, all the no's. Just continue to show up, continue to be consistent, be present, and do this work. And I think in time, the results that we're looking for will take effect.
that's going to test you. And see, that's the thing that we have that most don't have. See, we're patient with this purpose. See, this is purpose driven work, right? Not saying that their work isn't purposeful, but bro, we labor for 20 some years, 2 decades in prison. We labored for 2 decades in prison, brother, at young ages. When the world
Yeah,
said we wasn't gonna get out of prison, that we were not gonna be able to have anything after prison, brother, we labored. We People don't understand, and we sometimes make it look so good. We make it look easy when we walk out of prison and reentry. And this is one of the biggest things that I want us to really be honest about. Like, bro, we didn't just get here. Like getting out of prison, man. That I heard somebody say the hardest time for a person to get out of prison is the first 72 hours. I said, who told you the first 72 hours is the hardest? No, it isn't. In my 72 hours, you
right.
ain't thinking about nothing. You celebrate. That's not the hardest time. You're not thinking about going back to no jail in 72 hours. The most hardest time is after them 30 days when family members done got tired of seeing your butt laying on that couch, bro. When family members get tired of saying, "Hey, you going?" When they going to work and you still sitting at the house, that's the hardest time. When you stop putting on resumes in, and I mean not those applications, and they in that 30 days, that 60 days, that 90 days, in those 90 days, no one accepted the application. That's when it's hard. Someone said your first challenge is 72 hours. No, it isn't. But that's a person who's never
Mhm.
been to prison. 72
Yeah,
hours is not the hardest time for that 30 days, that 60 days, that 90 days is the hardest time for us when we walk out of prison, man. Because again, we are not prepared for the rejection that is going to come with the felony conviction. A lot of us walk out of prison. We're naive. I know I was naive. I didn't know they had this thing about when I left the streets, brother. I never was asked about a criminal conviction about when I applied for a job. I didn't realize that when I walked out of prison that was going to be now the standard for me. I didn't know that. No one really told me, like, hey, like that's I heard a couple dudes in prison talking about the job situation, but in real life, in real time, I didn't know. I didn't know, bro. I didn't know. I didn't know it was going to be a challenge. I didn't know what this thing called post incarceration syndrome was. I didn't know I was going to be very uncomfortable even being around my family and friends after prison. I didn't know this. I didn't know that I couldn't even hold a conversation with my family members for over 30 minutes before I get up from the table and walk off. And my dad was like, "Son, what's wrong with you?" Dad, I've been in visitation. All I did when I was in prison, I talked to you over the phone for 15 to 30 minutes over a phone. I have not sat in your presence in 22 years. That I don't know what to say. That's what we need to have the conversations about. Is that's part of it, like how complicated, how difficult it is for you to have conversation with family members. So after 72 hours, after all of the joys and excitement, the birthday parties, the welcome home party, now we got to
yeah,
have a real conversation. Especially now you're in a relationship, you met a female in prison, and now you home and you don't know what to say. She don't know what to say. You don't know what to do because now y'all was talking over a cell phone for years and writing letters. Guess what? You now there for 24 hours. What you gonna do? I don't know. How you doing today? You might want to text her. You don't know. Let me write you a letter. Let me leave a letter on the counter to tell you how I'm feeling or thinking today, because all of those are things that a brother or a sister have to redevelop, bro. Like, man, when I got out of prison, I met my wife before I got out of prison. When I got out of prison and got with my wife, man, I didn't know what to say. We used to laugh about
Right.
it. She was like, you want me to just go in the room and you call me and we act like we.
Yeah,
She was like,
that's funny,
my
but it's not funny.
she said we had a better conversation over the phone. Let me go in this bedroom while you sit in the living room and just call me. Let's see if we can rekindle this conversation. But those are the
Yeah.
things that we need to like be real about. But people don't see that, bro. We fought to get here. So at the end of the day, yeah, we can walk the system down because man, we know that bro, like we dreamed of this. I dream to have my own house. I dream to have my own business. I dream to be free. Um,
Yeah.
you and I, you and I, my brother, we're living on the wings of our prayers that we made at the most darkest moment. The most, Jamal, could you hear me? The most darkest moment when you was in solitary confinement, you found the strength to call on God 20 years ago, brother. And here you are right now having real problems. You got a wife at home. You sitting in your house. You're not on it. Bro, we're living on the prayers that we made 20 years ago. So when they
Yes,
tell
sir.
us that we can't come into school right now, bro, we know it's possible because we living on our prayers that we made 20 years ago.
Yeah.
You living on the prayer that you made 20 years ago, brother. So
Yeah.
don't think that you doing like, I got no, bro. You prayed. God prepared. God prepared you, prepared you. And when he opened the door, he tested you because you made that prayer in your broken state. And now look at you. Got your own podcast. We on YouTube, bro.
Yeah.
We living on the prayer that we made 20 years ago in a dark prison cell, man. So we await. God gonna open that door. We're gonna say that prayer at night. And we know the power of prayer, the power of faith, the power of prayer and faith is gonna change all things. Not saying that we're not gonna put the action, because
Right.
when we pray in our broken moments in prison, we put the action and we lived on the fruits of that. A lot of people don't like that, but bro, you prayed. So that told you that God answered your prayer because look where you at right now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Uh Man, it's been a wonderful conversation, man. I want to highlight a couple things
Mm-hmm.
in the chat real
Mm-hmm.
quick. Stephanie says, thank you, Brother Lester, and all of the Iron Men for continuing to show up for those who need what you have to give. Um, Ronald, what up, Ariel? Says the trauma of the experience is something he wouldn't wish on the worst of men. Wow, ain't that a statement?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Juliet says you are all living miracles.
We
Uh,
are.
Ronald again just said, I just let some young men who
Says, I just let some young man who hopefully his line of thought was resonated.
will resonate
Yeah.
and they don't fall in the river. I told them not to step on their own dreams. Absolutely. Absolutely. Amen. Lester, that was beautiful. Uh, so yeah, man, this has been a wonderful conversation, man. Before we get ready to close out, is there anything else you want to share? Any last words you want
Man,
to leave with the
listen, bro.
audience?
Man, I just like I say, bro. I want your listeners to really understand that when they see a man or woman who walked out of prison, even though we don't show the physical scars, there's a lot of emotional scars to where we are today. We earned the right to be here. We earned that right. And we're not asking anybody to give us that. We're saying, hey, Even though you don't see my scars, don't mean that I have not been cut or I have not been traumatized. But by the grace of God, God restored and healed the physical scars, but I got internal scars that I'm still processing. As anyone who's been in the system and transparency, I'm going to say authenticity, I truly believe that these conversations help transport people. When I'm authentic and being transparent about my journey as a man who came out of prison not fully prepared for, I was prepared for all of the other conversation around reentry, programming, and business. I had that, but one of the things that I failed in for many years was how to emotionally connect myself to my family, to my wife, how to work through my trauma of distrust and learn how to trust. How do I make my marriage better? How do I work through all of the challenges, knowing that there's not always going to be a smooth path in marriage? Marriage is going to come with a lot of hurdles.
Mhm.
Should I run from it because my trauma, because I'm so accustomed to trauma? When I face adversity in a marriage or something that challenged me emotionally, I immediately shut down and I want to run because that's in trauma. That's what I believe that we need to really understand because I know it's a brother out there, I know it's a sister out there that is in a relationship that is saying my husband has shut down emotionally. He's not emotionally available for me. He's not able to articulate how he feels. He shuts down when I hold him accountable. He does this. Man, we got to really identify these areas, right? I was talking to another guy, one of my good friend of mine got out of prison. His wife said, "Hey, we need to put some cameras up around the house because we're living in a neighborhood that is a little shady, right? We need to put some cameras up." My partner, he was like, "Nah, we don't need to put no cameras up. We don't need to put no cameras up around the house. You got me feel like I'm in prison again." And she was like, what are you talking about?" But I told when she called me and I said that's a trauma response because that person he immediately feels that he has no agency, he has no mobility with a camera around the house. He thinks she's tracking him. She's not tracking him. She's trying to make sure that you are safe and the house is safe. Or and another thing is your girl call you, you supposed to be coming from work, and she said, "Hey, baby, I noticed you a little late. What's going on? Why are you calling my phone to find out where I'm at? I'm on the highway." That's a trauma response. The woman is genuinely calling
Yeah.
to check, but your trauma response is you have not resolved that trauma. Your response is you don't need to be checking on me. You want you the police, you're a parole agent. Those are conversations that brothers are having privately in their marriages and in their relationships, but we're not talking about it. We're not talking about
Right.
these things that can create harm. That's why I think when you talk about marriage, relationships don't last that long after incarceration because we get out of prison, we done became intellectual, we done become well spoken, well read. We've done all of the right things except for how to reconnect the emotional wire to our brain to say, I'm a human being. I have emotions. I don't need to always shut down when I am challenged to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is okay. You don't have to be, it's okay. It's okay. And I share this in our close. We need to have these conversations, brother. Like for me, I remember I applied for a job, and I'm gonna close with this. I applied for a job, brother. And I got out of prison. I was home maybe a month out of prison. And one of my friends, he'd been home like a year, so he had his job as a janitor, like cleaning office buildings and stuff like that, right? So he said, "Hey man, I
Mhm.
can get you a job with this lady. She runs her own janitorial business." And at this time, I was thinking about starting a janitorial business because in prison, that's one of the number one things you've done in prison is wax floors, mop floors, and stuff like that, right?
Yep.
So he's like, I'm gonna connect you to this lady, and she don't call you, and you talk to her and let her know what's going on. So the lady called me the next day. I got on the phone with her. We talked, and I told her everything. I said I went to prison 19, but ran that whole spiel down about the background. She said, "You know what?" She said, I believe in redemption." She said, "I have a daughter that is going through a lot right now, and I think that by me being great, showing you grace and showing others grace, God will show grace to my daughter." She said, "Well, after we get off to the phone, send me a picture of you so that when you come into the building, the security guard will know to buzz you in. But we need to see a picture of you until you get your ID." So of course I got my phone less than 90 days, 30 days out of prison. I snapped the picture, but it was a picture with almost like a jailhouse pose, not smiling. Sent the picture to the lady. Boom, sent it to her. So I was like, okay. I sent it. The lady called me back immediately. I was like, I'm in my mind. I'm like, man, she must be feeling me. She might gonna give me some place. She looked at the brother. Brother looked good after prison. This white. She was a white woman, and she said,
Mhm.
she says, Lester. She screamed on the phone. She said, don't you ever send me or anyone else a picture like that. She said, you just told me you were convicted of murder. And she said, you look like you will come in this building and harm every one of my employees with that picture that you have. She said that was a jailhouse picture. Make the connection. In prison, if you look at any of your prison pose pictures that you may have brought home from prison, how many of those pictures you may be smiling in when you're on visit? Or even when your family's on visitation, you might be taking it, or you're in the yard taking a picture. So for 20 some years, I may smile every now and then, but I never took a picture. All of my pictures I have of my family, I never smiled in none of those pictures. That became my normal way, right? So this lady, that was my first time educating me about what I need to change in my reentry, and I needed to learn how to become more sociable in this world. In prison, that code was good in prison. You don't smile in prison. You stand on the wall with your back on the wall. You see dudes come through. You mind, yo, what's up? On the block the same way, yo, what's up? But in the real world, that's not true. That's not real. That's not healthy. So I had to like learn how to smile again. Like I look at my first 90 days, my first maybe 8 months to 12 months after prison, and all my pictures have been jailhouse pose pictures. It's not about that pose. It was that I never showed a smile. That I was kind of rude. People will come walk behind me. I'm like, yo, what's up? And they're like, my wife was like, what's that about? Because I was hyper vigilant. I was overwhelmed, overstimulated. So this is what I think that brothers and sisters need to have conversation about before you go and do the work, do the internal work. And I'm gonna close with
Yeah.
that.
Man, again, man, thank you, thank you. This has been a very enlightening conversation, a wonderful launch to season 4. I was looking forward to the conversation coming in. I already knew what to expect, and this has set the bar high for the rest of the season.
Appreciate you,
off
my
the
brother.
off the dribble, man. So definitely
Absolutely.
appreciate you, man. I look forward to working with you, doing work with you, moving forward. And can't wait till you come here to Indiana to operate with the crew and
Well,
and help till up the soil with us as we continue to do this work here in Indiana. Um, yeah, everybody that tapped in, thank you. Um, so as we close tonight's episode, I want to thank you for being part of this conversation.
mhm.
Season 4 is about more than dialogue. It's about direction. It's about how we move from awareness to action when it comes to reentry across our state. If tonight's conversation challenged you, inspired you, or gave you something to think about, don't let it stop here. Share this episode, start a conversation, lean into the work. And if you're looking for a way to get involved, partner, support, or learn more about the peer led work we're doing on the ground, visit us at Iron Sharpens Iron WAST. That is Iron Sharpens Iron, WAST.org. That's where you can connect with our team, explore our programs, and see how we're building sustainable pathways for returning citizens every single day. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, turn on your notifications, and join us next week at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for another powerful conversation. Until then, keep elevating, keep illuminating, and keep building pathways that make restoration possible. Thank you for joining us, and good night. Love is love.
Peace.